From rituals purposed to summon taxis driven by demons, used to ferry practitioners between worlds,
to rounds of hide and seek played against demonically possessed dolls, where the stakes could very well mean the participant's life.
Are you ready for our third list of picks for some of the scariest games you definitely shouldn't play?
Number 5. Charlotte's Web. Charlotte's Web, also called Charlotte's Mirror, is a ritual-style game purported to allow players to summon the spirit of a little girl named Charlotte, who, it's said, died long ago, and who will answer any question in the universe, but only if participants are prepared to answer any questions she might have for them in return. As the story goes, Charlotte Webster was a 7-year-old girl who lived in the 1400s, whose mother was accused of witchcraft and was burned at the stake in front of her. It's said that upon watching her mother die in agony, Charlotte managed to escape to the forest, where, in her youth and naivety, she succumbed to the perils of the wilds, her body to be picked apart by various animals, and her soul left restless. To participate in Charlotte's Web, 2 or more people are required. Players will need a child's toy as an offering, 2 chairs, a small table, a mirror, and flashlights, but not, under any circumstances, flame, as it's rumored Charlotte is terrified of fire, and the ritual will not work properly. Participants should set up their chairs facing in the same direction, with the table in between and just behind them, in a room without windows or that's been blacked out in its entirety. It's important that players not sit in the chairs until they're ready to begin. Participants should then set the offered child's toy on the table and the mirror in front of the chairs so that both seats can be viewed in its reflection. To begin, all lights should be doused and flashlights illuminated. Players should take their seats and gaze in the mirror, keeping their eyes on the reflection of the offered toy behind them. They should then, in unison, state, "I want to play Charlotte's Web." Once this step has been completed, the game has started, and it's said players should not break their gaze on the toy for any reason. It's purported that, eventually, Charlotte will show up in the reflection, and that when she does, players are not to look at her directly. It's said that if Charlotte takes the toy, it means she's happy with the offering provided, and that the player should prepare to exchange questions with her, but that if she doesn't take the toy, she's displeased, and that players should immediately end the game. To end Charlotte's Web at any point, players should, in unison and without diverting their gaze from the mirror, state firmly, "Goodbye, Charlotte," which will result in Charlotte beginning to wander from view before taking the toy and disappearing into the dark. While a number of versions of this game exist into the present, most conclude with a similar warning. Charlotte's Web should only be performed once, as risking a second round could result in Charlotte's fixation on the player. While those who have displeased Charlotte have told of damage to their homes and even injury to their persons, the many who have had positive interactions often describe her as creepily sweet, and usually recount deeply enjoying the time and conversations they've shared.
Number 4. Hitori Kakurenbo. While Hitori Kakurenbo is easy on the ears and pretty fun to say, this messed up practice is one straight from our worst nightmares, and is essentially comprised of a game of hide and seek with a ghost or worse, channeled through an old doll as a medium. In case you're actually considering doing this, let me just repeat that part. This ritual is literally intended to summon an evil presence into a doll inside of your home to hunt you, so think carefully on your choices. Like many of our other dangerous games, Hitori Kakurenbo was started on a Japanese horror thread circa 2006, and in just 2 years, by the fall of 2008, had crossed the globe and had been translated into most languages. To play Hitori Kakurenbo, players will need an old creepy doll, a needle and some red thread, some rice, a knife or scissors, a glass of salt water, and something biological, such as fingernails, hair, or yes, even a drop of blood, though some claim blood can have dangerous supernatural consequences. At exactly 3 a.m., players must cut the doll open and remove its stuffing, and then restuff it with the rice and hair, nails, or blood, before naming it and sewing it shut with the red thread. We'll call our hypothetical doll Sally. Any leftover thread should be used to bind the doll. The player must then turn off all lights, fill a bathtub or sink, and declare aloud, "I'll be the first guard," 3 times in a row, before throwing their doll into the water. Players must then make their way through their play space, turn on their television as the only source of light, get into their hiding space, close their eyes, count to 10, and then return to the doll. Upon reaching their doll, players must then exclaim, "I found you, Sally," but of course with whatever other name was selected. They must remove the doll from the water, cut the red thread, and state loudly, "Sally, you are next," before stabbing their doll with their knife, leaving the blade in place and returning it to its water source. Players must then take their glass of salt water and return to their hiding place, and the game will have officially started. After following these steps, many have reported a host of chilling phenomenon, such as disembodied voices and whispers, the sounds of unnerving laughter or giggles heard from empty rooms, otherworldly noises from the television, the clatter of furniture being scooted around, heavy footsteps from empty rooms, and more, with legend telling that once these things have started occurring, it's important the player remains hidden until the very end of the ritual, lest they suffer unimaginably horrible consequences. If a player panics and wants to end the game early, it's said they should wait until the noises stop or seem further away before taking a gulp of salt water and holding it in their mouth while carrying the remainder of the glass until they locate the doll. At this stage, it's warned that one shouldn't be at all surprised if the doll is somewhere far from where it was originally left. Once the doll is located, players should dump their glass of salt water on it before spraying the salt water in their mouths over it and exclaiming, "I win!" 3 times in a row. When Hitori Kakurenbo concludes, it's advised players burn their dolls into ash. In 2009, this gruesome game was portrayed in a movie titled Hitori Kakurenbo Gakijo Ban, which was directed by Masafumi Yamada, and in reality, purportedly, out of 3 prominent and publicly documented games, one player has disappeared entirely, another has had a spirit attach itself to him, and another still claims to experience ongoing activity to this very day.
Number 3, Daruma-San. Daruma-San, also called the bath game, is a ritual practice that purportedly summons a morbidly disfigured ghost that will proceed to stalk players until the game concludes. Like many of our other terrifying games, Daruma-San originated in what we're going to start referring to as the scary game capital of the world, or Japan, and follows several basic rules of an earlier Japanese children's game called Daruma-San ga Kuranda, which translates roughly to "the Daruma doll fell down," Daruma or Dharma dolls traditionally acting as symbols of good fortune. For our English viewers, this game most closely translates to red light, green light. However, in this ritual, you are it, and the Daruma is trying to catch you. Before we go any further, as a disclaimer, and this probably goes without saying, most variants of this game warn that you very simply shouldn't ever play it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Just a big ol' warning on how dangerous it actually is. To play this game, participants must enter their bathroom, undress, fill their bathtub, and turn out the lights. They should then enter the tub facing the faucet and should sit down, closing their eyes while gently washing their hair. While washing, players should state aloud the following: "Daruma-san fell down," and should repeat the phrase over and over until they have concluded washing their hair. Eyes should remain shut at all times. If successful, it's said that in one's mind's eye, a Japanese woman will appear in a bathtub and will proceed to slip and fall face first, gashing her right eye out. At this time, it's strongly urged that, regardless of what players hear or how real it sounds, that they do not open their eyes or turn around. Players should then ask, "Why did you fall in the bathtub?" and let the question linger. Keeping eyes closed and being careful not to slip, players should then step from the tub without draining the water. They should feel their way from the bathroom, exit, and close the doors, after which, legend tells, they can finally open their eyes. After a good night's sleep, it's said that the game will begin. Throughout their day, participants will feel the presence of this mysterious woman behind them, and may even catch glimpses of her in their peripheral or in reflections. Her black tangled hair a mess, her pale face bearing only one good eye. It's said the woman will attempt to get closer and closer as the day goes on, and that if she gets too close, one should yell "Tomare," which translates to stop, before running away. Be warned, however, the duration of the tomare is said to dwindle the more it's used. The most important rule of this hunt is for the player to not allow the presence to catch them until they've performed the closing ritual. To close Daruma-San, one must complete several steps before midnight the following night, or it could allow for the presence to enter their dreams indefinitely. To close, players should catch the presence in their line of sight, and even if it tries to hide, should not break their gaze. They should then exclaim, "Kita," meaning roughly, "I cut you loose," as they move their arms in a chopping motion. If this is done correctly, the participant has completed the game. If not, and the spirit remains, the player should run, as it's rumored it will kill them, and likely swiftly. This devilish presence is rumored to be fond of water and dark spaces, so players are urged to avoid both while playing Daruma-San, as they may allow her to move closer and faster. Oh, and one more time, we highly recommend you do not play this game, but if you do, legend tells you should only play it once, as the second time, she will come back in a stronger form.
Number 2. The Hooded Man. The Hooded Man is an infamous ritual-style game purported to summon a taxi from the other side that's driven by a demon who it's rumored will ferry players to another realm from which they can either find their ways home or, terrifyingly, be stuck forever. Versions of the Hooded Man first began surfacing in 2014, though some claim it was either circulating long before or evolved from an older legend. As a warning, it suggested this game never be attempted in a state of agitation, nervousness, stress, or fear. Though, if you haven't picked up from the title of our upload, we don't recommend you play any of these games, ever. The Hooded Man is intended to be carried out solo, though some have claimed success in groups. All the player or players will need are 2 lengths of black cord or rope measuring at about half a meter in length, a phone, with some versions stating an old-fashioned rotary phone works best, matches or a lighter, a watch, and salt. Before starting, it's highly recommended players perform some form of cleansing ritual, or at the very least burn a little sage, or spread some salt or ash over their front doors. Players should then shut all doors, windows, and curtains, and extinguish all sources of light while powering down all electronics. They should then set the 2 black cords along with the matches or lighter near their phone of choice, and should empty their pockets of any power or protection items, while keeping only their watch on their wrist. They should then sit in front of their chosen phone and immediately begin counting to 13, after which, while leaving the phone on the hook, they should dial the number 20496888. Participants should then tie one of their black cords to the telephone's handset without making contact with the actual phone itself, and should lift said handset by holding the cord only, before then dialing 25515823. They should then count to 13 again before setting the handset down, not in its cradle mind you, but next to the phone box. Players should then speak the following sentence into the receiver: "Hello, I need a cab," before untying the first black cord from the headset and replacing it with their second one, which should also be fastened securely. Following this step, the first cord should be burned immediately if possible, the ashes kept aside. After following these steps, players should open their curtains and look outside. If the ritual is working properly, there will be a black taxicab parked in front of their home or selected game space. Participants must then exit their homes, making sure to lock their doors behind them, and should climb into the cab's empty back seat. They should then close their eyes and let themselves drift off to sleep, which it said should happen quickly. When players awaken, they should use their watch to check the time. If it reads anything other than 3:30 a.m., they should immediately exit the cab and return to their home before performing the closing ritual, which we'll explain in just a minute. If the player's watch does read 3:30, they should attempt to go back to sleep. It's said that when players awaken for the second time, they will do so to find the cab is being driven on a highway by a man wearing a hood. It's said that during this ride, it's important players don't panic, attempt to get out of the cab, or speak to any other passengers the driver may pick up along the way. When participants are ready to go home, they should lean close to the hooded man's ear and slowly and firmly state, "I have reached my destination." Players should then fall back to sleep for one final time, and when they awaken should be back in front of their home or selected game space. To close this game out, players should sit back down in front of their phone and dial 200082. They should lift the headset with the black cord, set it down, albeit not on the hook, and state firmly into the receiver, "Thank you for the ride." They should then untie the second black cord from the handset, burn it, and bury the ashes from both cords, while scattering a generous amount of salt over the burial site. It's also highly recommended players perform a closing cleansing. On a final note, it's purported one can allow the cab ride to go on for as long as they desire, but that the further one travels from home, the harder it might be to get back. While it's unknown what would happen should someone step from the cab mid-drive, some suspect the player may be left stranded between worlds.
Number 1. The Elevator to Another Realm. The Elevator to Another Realm, also referred to as Elevator to Hell, is a ritual-style game purported to allow players to travel to an alternate world, a dark and dangerous dimension posing a multitude of threats, from which it's said few ever return. While the exact origins of this risky game are unknown, a popular theory pins it as a result of a series of brutal accidents involving faulty elevators in Japan through the 1990s and early 2000s, with one more prominent incident transpiring in 2006 in the Minato ward of Tokyo, Japan, when a lift started ascending while the doors were still open, concluding in the death of a 16-year-old. Further strengthening this theory, some of the earliest locatable data regarding this odd practice comes from a 2008 post on a Japanese forum that was followed in 2010 by mentions from a South Korean media company, giving some insight as to the rate of this legend's initial spread. All that's required to play Elevator to Another Realm is a willing participant and a building that has at least 10 floors and that contains at least one elevator. On a side note, it's rumored that if anyone enters mid-journey, it will ruin the ritual, and the participant will have to start over when they are alone again. To initiate this game, a singular player must enter their chosen building alone and step onto the elevator. They must then visit the 4th, 2nd, 6th, 2nd, 10th, and 5th floors in exact order. Upon reaching the 5th floor, some purport that a young woman might enter and join the player. It's suggested the player not look at, speak to, or make any notice of this woman, as she's not actually human and can be dangerous. While on the 5th floor, players should press the button for the 1st floor. It's said that doing this should cause the elevator to rise up to the 10th floor, where the doors will open to reveal another world. If this step fails and the elevator instead heads to the 1st floor, it's suggested the player should say nothing, exit the elevator immediately, leave the building, and head home for the night. While early Japanese versions of this ritual ended abruptly, leaving the player trapped on the 10th floor in this alternate dimension, a 2011 Korean version began including a return process, as well as a means to cancel the ritual midway through. This version told that, to cancel midway through, players should hit the button for any other floor besides the 1st or 10th at any time, which should allow them to return safely to floor 1 and exit. Unfortunately, for those who've already arrived on the 10th floor, things can get a little more complicated. In this situation, it's said players who haven't exited the elevator to explore the realm should remain on the elevator, and those who've exited should make sure to return to the same elevator they arrived on with haste. They must then travel to the same floors in the aforementioned order, but it's said this time pressing 1 should actually take them to the ground floor, after which they should be free to escape. By the end of 2011, versions of this tale had reached English blogs, chain emails were started, and around the same time, several prominent stories from a handful of individuals claiming to have traveled to this other realm began surfacing in media. In one high-profile incident in 2013, 21-year-old Elisa Lamb, who was staying at the Cecil Hotel, seemingly disappeared from its grounds. Tragically, Lamb's body was later discovered within the hotel's rooftop water tank. While the case remains unsolved, the hotel's security footage, which has since been released, reveals Lamb acting chillingly erratic inside and next to the elevator, leading some to speculate that she may have been playing the game and that something went terribly wrong. In 2021, director Michael Goy announced his plans for the production of a new horror flick based around this aged ritual, called simply The Elevator Game, and though its release date remains uncertain at the time of this upload, it's bound to offer a spine-tingling perspective on this dangerous occult practice. Taking into consideration its dark and tragic history, and coupling it with a skyscraper of terrifying witness accounts, we felt Elevator to Another Realm was the perfect choice as the scariest game you probably, definitely shouldn't play.
Thanks for tuning in for our third list of some of the scariest games you definitely shouldn't play.
If you enjoyed this upload, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, throw us a like, and share us with anyone you feel deserves a good scare.
Good night.